Hey there guys, so just another video, this time why I prefer pull-ups over rows and deadlifts. Now that may surprise a few people considering that I'm a powerlifter, but the simple reality is I train because I enjoy it, and powerlifting obviously is a sport that I really enjoy, but along the way you need to incorporate other exercises, for variety, and just to enjoy your training. Because if you stick with your training and you're enjoying it, you're going to be successful long term. Now you got to remember this is a video as to why I prefer pull-ups. I'm not necessarily saying pull-ups are better than rows and deadlifts, but I'm saying this is why I prefer pull-ups over rows and deadlifts. So, very long story short, I enjoy bench pressing. I'm relatively good at it. So one of the staples for a successful, bench press is having a strong, upper back. Now, for me, I found rows and pull-ups did the job really well. Now, when I did heavy rows, especially barbell rows and the rest of it, I found it taxed my lower back, and that in itself isn't necessarily a negative thing at all. Heavy barbell rows are a good overall exercise, to help you grow. But when you then have to squat as well, it's like, okay, if I'm going heavy on Monday and I've got to do squats on Tuesday or Wednesday, I don't really want my lower back to be, fatigued at all. I want to be able to squat well. So obviously, pull-ups fit that bill really well. I can hit my upper back really hard, can hit my lats really hard, but my lower back doesn't, cop any of the force. So from that standpoint, it's like, okay, I've got an exercise, that's going to help me bench press, but it's not going to take away from me squatting heavy. Now, Wednesday would rock around, I'd do my heavy squats, and then, lower back has been worked a little bit, nothing crazy, but then if I was to go and do, barbell rows on a Wednesday as a, accessory exercise, that's going to take away from my deadlift session on Friday. So, especially in a comp prep, I deadlift on a Friday. So, I want my lower back again to be, functioning and happy and healthy. So it means, again, Wednesday as an assistant exercise, I throw in pull-ups. And then Friday comes around, the lower back has more or less recovered from the heavy squats. Like front squats, it will recover from if I've gone really heavy with barbell squats, like back squat. That's a different story altogether. But, Friday comes along and then I deadlift. Now, depending on how much energy I have left over, yeah, I could throw in some barbell rows and the rest of it. But, as in a comp prep, I try and, limit the amount of accessory exercises that I'm doing because I find it's quite hard to recover from the Wednesday squats and the Friday deadlifts. Now, when it's off season, I typically, I bench press, I do my pull-ups. Wednesday, I front squat. And then again, I don't do any barbell rows on a Wednesday because I want to save my mid and lower back for mucking around with the heavy natural stones on a Friday. That's sort of, like a fun version of deadlifts in a way. You get really good at picking heavy, awkward objects up off the ground. And it's just an exercise, that I've found has developed my deadlift really well without taxing my nervous system. So in order to be successful, with my heavy, stone session on a Friday, I need to make sure that my lower back is in good nick. So, you fast forward, you rewind a few days, look at what training's like. Oh, I've got my front squats. Okay, I'm not going to push it too much. The other big, advantage that I've found with pull-ups over, the other exercises, especially obviously the deadlifts and the heavy barbell rows, is, I just didn't cop any of that CNS fatigue, so central nervous system. I just didn't cop any of that heavy fatigue, and it didn't really matter if I added, weight to my pull-ups. I just never really got, taxed in that regard. And I could always find, pull-ups worked the lats for me really well as my upper back, but I had a few different variations that I could muck around with. So sometimes, I'd grab over the top of the rails, as you saw just then, works the back slightly differently. Sometimes I'd do neutral grip, quite narrow. Sometimes I'd do neutral grip pull-ups quite wide. So with these, these are just the neutral grip pull-ups, and like a cue that I focus on to get the most out of my pull-ups, and working my upper back, which, you could use the same cue for barbell rows. It just didn't work quite as well. For me, when I'm doing pull-ups, I'm actually thinking of trying to pull my elbow down into my hip, sort of tuck it into my pocket. And I found, that cue for me worked really well for pull-ups and just helped me activate my lats and everything in my upper back. And it's sort of finding exercises that work well for you where you can hit the target muscle group that you're after. So, if you did pull-ups and you could never really feel your back working, but, you did dumbbell or barbell rows and you could always feel your lats engage and your upper back always, contract really well, then, that's an exercise that you might want to go with. For me, when I do the barbell rows, I feel it a lot in my mid and upper back, more mid back, but nothing really in the way of my lats. And then, the next day I never really felt my lats being taxed. Things like pull-ups and, the pull-up ladder and things like that, I always found, for me, it hit my lats really hard. And then, having a big back just carried over really well, obviously, to the bench press. But it also just helped me on the squats. I was just more stable under load as I just had a stronger back and just, a bigger support area, essentially, for where I'm going to rest the barbell. And then just having a really strong back is also going to carry across to your deadlift. And, considering I didn't do a lot of deadlifts, and my deadlift is still relatively strong, it just sort of goes to show that, you don't have to just stick to squat, bench, and deadlift to be a really good powerlifter. For me, in terms of that, I only bench press, I front squat, and then I do, the natural stones or muck around with pull-ups for my back. So really, I'm only hitting, the bench press as a typical, powerlifting movement. The other two exercises, I just found front squats worked better. And as a result, for my back stuff, I just found doing lots of pull-ups worked really, really well. And then secondly, to pull-ups, I just found, the natural stones was another exercise for me that also worked really, really well. So, look, it just, a lot of the time it comes back to the individual. And like I said, with this video, this is, why I prefer, doing pull-ups compared to barbell rows and deadlifts. Now, with that being said as well, if I was to pick a variation of rows, I actually prefer the dumbbell row. I just found the movement was a little bit better. I wasn't as fixed with a barbell. I could just manipulate the weight a little bit better, could move it where I needed it exactly. And it was just easier to have one arm, on a bench to stabilize, so I can really put my body in the best position, and it didn't feel as taxing on the lower back. With deadlifts, I actually really liked, the wide snatch grip deadlifts or, deficit deadlifts, even though they hit my lower back, but it depended on what I was trying to work. So yeah, that's just my take. Any questions, feel free to comment below, and have a great day.